Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the MPO Board and Public Hearing to order. Will everyone please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our gracious and Heavenly Father, we're thankful that you allow us to come together tonight to work for the betterment of this community. We ask that you humble our hearts and regulate our minds and make decisions to make this community a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. We ask that you put your loving arms around those that put their lives on the line for us each and every day, whether they're on this soil or on foreign soils. We ask that you, when their work is done, take them back to their homes to find everything safe and sound. Father, we ask that you specifically and watch out for those who are in California, our brothers and sisters out there that are suffering because of the fires. We ask that you protect them, guide them, comfort them, and keep them, and protect those firefighters that put their lives on the line each and every day to try to save homes and lives out there. Father, when our work is done here tonight, we ask you to take us back to our homes to find everything safe and sound. This is all blessings. We ask in your righteous and holy name. Amen. Amen. I'd like to say good evening to everyone. We're going to call for the approval of the minutes of October 1st, 2019, October 9th, 2019 workshop. I have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
There's a motion by, who was it? Quita, Councilman Quita. Who was seconded? School Board Member Kona to second to approve the minutes. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers likewise. Motion's adopted. We now move to public comment on non-hearing items. Is there anyone here to speak on non-hearing items? Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Gone. Committee reports. Mr. Roberts.
Good evening. I'm Bill Roberts. I'm the chairman of the Citizens Advisory Committee for your MPO. I'm a resident of Hillsborough County. I'm happy to give this report from your Citizens Advisory Committee. At our most recent meeting, we had two citizens offer public comment, one speaking in favor of the Boulevard study and promoting safer walkable and biking communities. The other public comment had to do with supporting the FDOT's preferred alternative, otherwise known as the quick fix, for the downtown interchange. In action items, the CAC approved and forwarded to your MPO board a draft of the 2045 plan by a vote of 8-6 with the following two recommended amendments. The first amendment was approved by a vote of 9-7, recommending striking projects which involve the widening of State Road 60 from Dover Road to the Polk County line. This amendment was offered by a member of the CAC as an expression of our desire to discourage sprawl in the county, and as I indicated, it was approved. I have since learned that the staff of the Planning Commission also recommended deleting this, primarily because it was inconsistent with the comp plan as it currently exists. But I'm sure you're familiar with that. The second amendment that the CAC is recommending to you was approved by a vote of 8-6, recommending striking project S3. That is the addition of the toll lanes on Interstate 275 between Himes Avenue and the Hillsborough River. The reasoning behind this was that the SEIS has not been concluded and the project has not been fully vetted, in our opinion. The CAC also heard a report on the FDOT Tentative Work Program. Members asked a number of questions touching on crosswalks, signals, elevated lanes, and the allocation of funding between transit and highway project, but did not pass a motion regarding their concerns. And then lastly, I want to advise you that on November 13th, the CAC will have our regular meeting at the Expressway Authority offices, where we will have the benefit of a tour of the Traffic Management Center, and this will be part of our regular meeting. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I see no questions, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Ms. Torres.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Torres may be helping someone in the audience, so I could give the committee reports if... No, that's Ms. Silva. You got it? Here she is.
Good evening. I ran up the stairs. Jenny Torres, MPS. What a fine time for the printer to jam. That was nice. May I pass that out? Anyway, okay, for your committee reports. Oh my gosh. So I'm guessing that you just heard the CAC report. Okay. In addition to the CAC comments, the committees approved and forwarded the 2045 to you guys. The Livable Roadways Committee requested that the next update incorporate some bold performance measures and that commit to reducing vehicle delay, greenhouse gases, and improve safety. I should be in better shape.
Take a breath.
I should be in better shape. I mean, I'm not at all nervous to be here, by the way. And I do play some sports, but I can't run up a flight of stairs without breathing hard. The TD, the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board, fully endorsed the LRTP, and actually they were really happy to see what was included in there for transit, filling sidewalk gaps, and completing complete streets treatments. So they were very supportive of the document. Committees also reviewed the letter of comment on the DOT tentative work program. Those comments have been included in the letter that you're going to be taking action on in just a couple minutes. Okay, they heard status reports on the Gandy Bridge PD and on CSX US 41 grade separation study. The BPAC did ask for a letter be sent to DOT, and that letter is in your consent agenda tonight, just requesting a side path with the separation from the roadway be included in that CSX project. I'm almost back to normal. Okay, in addition to weighing in on the DOT tentative work program, the policy committee also discussed the process for updating the TIP priorities. Members asked staff to schedule a discussion at a future board meeting and prepare a letter to the local jurisdictions and agencies asking them to confirm that their legislative bodies approved their project priority request or affirmatively delegated the submittal of requests to their staff. The policy committee also discussed creating separate priority lists for the major investments from the bucket investment programs, just to highlight the importance of those major projects. That was your committee report. We'll just move very shortly to a very brief update on the online comments. Emails and Facebook posts were received, and those that address the 2045 LRTP update will be included in Lisa Silva's presentation that you'll hear in just a couple minutes. We did receive some other emails. Gary Cloyd thanked Beth for riding the Cross Bay Ferry. He was very happy with that service and thought it was a great compliment to the streetcar. A records request was received from Sharon Calvert regarding the scope of work related to the I-275 North alternative, and documents were provided. Lena Young sent an email commenting on the regional competitiveness report, and she just would like to see more walking being addressed, as it provides great connectivity in safe places, and it's a healthy alternative. And lastly, Jean Duncan wrote to thank a number of agencies, the MPO included, for their surtax presentations to the IOC. She noted hearing how impressed the members were with everyone's professionalism and ability to plan and discuss and design the projects that they'd like to construct. I am completed with the online comments and the committee reports.
Any questions? Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We move to the consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda: the committee appointments and the letter requesting by BPAC regarding US 41 CSX grades separation. Is there a motion to accept the?
Motion to accept.
There's a motion by Commissioner Smith to accept the consent agenda report, second by Commissioner Kemp. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Action items. Letter of comment on FDOT tentative work program.
Good evening, Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. Tonight I'm going to go through some of the letter or comments that we have from the tentative work program. Each of the committees saw this tentative work program from FDOT looking at fiscal years 23 to 26. And through that, they had a list of comments. In your packet, there's a series of maps that show what those projects were, so I'm not going to go in detail. I'm just going to review the comments that were included in the letter. So initially, through the committee presentations, we had the ITS committee made a motion to promote more funding for ITS-related projects, that's intelligent transportation systems. We also had the TAC made a motion. There were some projects along State Road 60 west of Dover Road that included some resurfacing with intersection improvements that were deferred to 2028. They asked that if there is an opportunity that those projects be moved back into the 5-year work program, that they can be. The policy committee also had a discussion and requested more information about projects labeled as urban corridor improvements and resurfacings. A lot of times these do include walk bike improvements, so having better understanding at the design level what is being accomplished through these projects. There was also a couple of comments that were updated or added after the initial letter was forwarded to you. That includes the Transportation Disadvantage Coordination Board passed 2 motions. The first one wanted to support FDOT's continued focus and concentration on looking at TD-related projects. This includes transit capital and operations, bike ped improvements, and also complete streets, as well as asking FDOT to standardize the way that they address the needs of the visually impaired community. This includes at crosswalks and downtowns, as well as shopping areas and other activity centers. The last change was staff had a comment regarding US 92 to reiterate the importance of that project. We changed the limits of that from I-75 to the Polk County. This includes both 2 sections on the far east and west side of widening, as well as intersection enhancements in the middle section of that project. So if you have any questions, please let me know, or else we're asking that you approve the letter to be forwarded to FDOT for comments.
Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Second.
Who made the motion? Motion by Mr. Kona, second by Commissioner Kemp. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let them know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Okay, we're going to move into the public hearing for the draft 2045 long-range plan transportation. A summary of comments received during the 30-day public comment period. Ms. Silva.
Okay, so we advertised and had our 30-day window, and these are the comments that have been received so far. You have physical copies in all of your board packets, so I'm going to just hit the highlights. We had 1 phone call. Linda Martin in the Keystone, Odessa area said that we need better roads. We need to improve Gun Highway, Tarpon Springs, Van Dyke, Lutz Lake, and Racetrack roads. She would like to see them widened and the intersections improved. In addition, she mentioned that there needs to be some of the culverts replaced out in that area, particularly between Keystone and Inland Lakes. We had a couple of Facebook posts, including one from Rick Fernandez. He will be out of town for the hearing tonight, so please accept these brief comments as part of the public record. 5 members of the MPO voted to strike the downtown interchange quick fix option from the TIP in June 2019. I asked those 5 and others to act accordingly with relationship to the LRTP, strike the downtown interchange quick fix option in favor of no build, and give the city time to move forward with multimodal transit options, not requiring expansion of the interstate through Tampa's urban core. And secondly, that the MPO Citizens Advisory Committee has recommended striking express toll lanes through West Tampa on Tampa Bay Next Section 5 between West Shore and downtown from the LRTP, so he asked that you support that recommendation. We had some additional emails that were very similar to echoing the Citizens Advisory Committee motions. Some of them even specifically listed those. So that was Helen Ann Travis said she would not be able to attend, that she asked that that as the community has stated, to stop expanding interstates, prioritize large-scale transit, listen to the people first, equity, access, and climate resiliency. And then she says, I also request the following for the CAC. Remove the downtown interchange operational plan from the LRTP. It just induces more demands and dumps interstate traffic on our city streets. Remove line items S3, which is constructing the toll road through West Tampa. Remove S27, 28, and 29, widening State Road 60, AKA Brandon Boulevard. Then Greg Gall had the exact same wording, so that's 2 there. Then our other Facebook post is quite lengthy, but it doesn't specifically state the CAC recommendations, but it's Mr. Shane Regal. He stands in opposition to the proposed LRTP. He cites the City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan as some of the his support, that the population is going to continue to grow, but the community has supported the taxing themselves for transit. He cites the air quality concerns, and the cars are just killing and injuring people and making our roads unsafe. So he says, please do not support adding capacity lanes or tolls through Tampa's urban core. Then there's another one. Laura O'Neill, she's a graduate student with the studying urban and regional planning and a member of the Student Advocates for Progressive Planning at USF. She writes supporting that the MPO removed S3, 27, 28, and 29 from the LRTP in their final hearing, mentioning Lexus lanes and suburban sprawl as support. Then we had 2 letters of support written, one by the Tampa Downtown Partnership, and they're here to speak, so I won't summarize all of the statistics they write in supporting the LRTP as is drafted. And then the West Shore Alliance also, same thing, they're here in attendance, so I just mentioning their letter of support. And then we had Sharon Calvert wrote many questions asking about the cost estimates and how the revenues were allocated, and staff responded and answered each of those and provided resources for her. So in summary, we had like 6 in suggesting some edits to it, to kind of neutral, and then 2 in support. And that's all we've had in the last 30 days. And last I checked, we had 13 signed up to speak. So I would assert that we did a great job getting the 15,000 responses that we had in our outreach campaign to walk everyone through, hear their concerns, and reflect them as best we can in a balanced manner in the draft plan that's proposed for your consideration tonight. That concludes the.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're now moving to the overview of the 2045 plan and revisions to the comment period draft. Mr. Bauer, good evening.
Wonderful. Thank you and good evening. My name is Todd Brower. I've been working with the Hillsborough MPO to develop the cost feasible plan, but also the final document that you see before you, as well as bringing together all the other analysis that have been done and putting that in a format that's easy then to find the more technical analysis that was completed. And at the same time, too, we'll be completing the compliance report. So once you all, assuming that you adopted tonight, you go through the adoption, we'll then go through the process of making sure that it fits within all of the federal and state requirements, which is what we've been doing from the very beginning, but we like to do that in a nice report. Now, some of the things I'm going to be showing you tonight, we actually went through at our last meeting, but I think it's important to go through them, and then I'm going to go through the changes that were made relative to the public comments that we received, as well as feedback that we got from you all last time. Oh. Thank you. Wonderful. All right, well, it's been quite a journey, and that bus went a lot faster than I realized as it just went through there. But you had an array of public involvement, and again, you were hearing the benefits of that as to what you were able to receive from the public and their ideas of what the future would look like for transportation within this area. And it included a whole bunch of ideas about, improving multimodal opportunities, making sure that we're reducing congestion, that we're looking for alternative ways to get to our jobs, to get to where we're going. So that's encompassed the entire process, this public involvement outreach. But at the same time then, we also had a process that included the aspirational side of it. What are the goals and objectives? What would you like to see your community look like in 2045? Bringing us then to understand what are the needs relative to that and how much do those needs cost? How much does it cost not just to build them, but to also operate and maintain them at the same time? Then we get our budget, the federal and state forecasts of how much dollars there are available. And all of that then goes through a budgeting process, looking at the eligibility of the funds versus what the needs are and getting to that draft feasible plan, and then getting you to where you are tonight with the adoption. Now, I don't want this to be seen as final, and we always joke within the industry that planning just never ends. We're always planning something. And I know that we've talked often about the need to get something done. You know, we hear that idea that we've planned a lot. Let's actually start moving people and giving them opportunities to have other alternatives to get to where they need to go. Well, as part of this process, then we wanted to make sure that we had some flexibility as it related to it, because there were still a lot of questions that were out there that needed to be answered. So we're looking at the surtax, as well as ongoing studies that are occurring right now that FDOT is doing. With the downtown interchange, several PD&E studies, as well at the same time of your undertaking at looking at the feasibility of the boulevard concept. So we wanted to make sure that all of those things were addressed as part of this plan and making sure that it was flexible so that way it could adapt and as you move forward in the adoption, knowing that this isn't just the final statement, this is part of that process of getting you moving forward to, again, changing transportation, that it's time Hillsborough and getting us moving forward. Now, again, it all starts with the budget. I mean, that's where my work comes in. It's looking at those federal state dollars and looking at their eligibility. What can they be used for? And that's where it gets really interesting, because it's all about, there are certain systems that certain dollars can be used for. The SIS, the state highway system, a large portion of it goes towards those roadway improvements. But it's also looking at the eligibility of what funds have some flexibility to them. What could be used on local roads? How does that look? So we take all of that and are putting it together into buckets. So programs, smaller projects that you can implement quickly that don't require right-of-way, and then setting aside those dollars for major investments that you're going to have well-defined, that are going to be mapped, that are going to have distinct specific descriptions, as well as limitations as to where they go. So the first step in that process is, again, understanding what those needs are. Now, we looked at it with the surtax and without the surtax. And again, this is where we start then thinking about those buckets and the programs and how they can be utilized and how there can be flexibility in your decision making. And I want to say that working with your staff, everything that we did working with them was to make sure that you were getting the information so you can make solid decisions. That's the basis of what we were working with on this plan. Again, flexibility, making sure that there was also some clear direction as to where this plan was going, but also those options. So when we first looked at it without the surtax, almost 55% of those dollars are set aside for the SIS or the SHS. When we start looking at the surtax, things change quite a bit. You now have more options for transit, for other multimodal options. So we saw a great opportunity then to really broaden this plan to make it comprehensive in all kinds of modes. Now, I always want to reiterate the public involvement that occurred here. I mean, this was massive. This came into all of it. And that also included public involvement with you, sitting down with you individually, hearing what you wanted to see from this plan, what was important to you. As an elected body, you're representing that public, and you're listening to everything that they're saying. And you've got 15 people that are also going to comment on this plan after my presentation. That's been a part of this process throughout, that the public's been involved and you're hearing their voice. And I have to say that working with your staff, we've worked really hard to make sure that that is applied within this plan, and why we've developed the flexibility and the programs that we have. So we've got 4 programs and then money set aside for major investments. So the 4 programs are the State of Good Repair and Resiliency, Vision Zero, Smart Cities, Real Choices When Not Driving. Those are the 4 programs. So they're programmatic, they're smaller projects, they're ones that you can implement quickly, they're multimodal in nature. It's to look at things like improving safety. It can reduce congestion when you're looking at smart cities. There's all kinds of opportunities to improve there. Now you see that the largest portion is actually looking at those 4 programs. So 38% of it goes toward those major investments. Now that is a big portion, but we're talking about major investments, large capital expenses that require a lot of money to get something done. And again, we were relating this to what we had heard from you, the input that you had given us, and then also what the public looked at when we looked at these dollars with the same notion that we're always required to look at the eligibility from it from a federal and state perspective. So we always had that in mind. So what do these programs buy you? Well, a whole array of opportunities here. You've got repaving, you've got transit maintenance, complete street treatments for bike and pedestrians, you got improved intersections, all kinds of opportunities to help congestion in just removing cars off the road, but also then making it more efficient for the cars that are on the roadway, expanded bus service. And then looking at those major projects, that's where you start looking at where right-of-way is going to be required, or it's going to be a large capital expense. Again, those projects that we map out that have clear definitions, descriptions, and limits. So where we're starting with the major investments was the challenge that we had before us, and we talk about that flexibility, is there's some real decisions that still need to be made related to what would fixed guideway look like and where would that occur. So it's not to say though that the MPO hasn't done some work related to this. So looking at everything from reusing the freight rail tracks, are there opportunities there starting in downtown, going to USF corridor, potential future expansions as well. Also looking at the downtown rapid transit new corridor and expanding the streetcar system. So really looking at fixed guideway in a unique way. The challenges related to this is this is for the HART board to start looking for the surtax and really giving that definition. But the MPO has a great opportunity to work with them to help them understand what's the impact, help evaluate, and see how we can actually increase transit ridership within the area. And that's not to forget also water transit. So this is multimodal in nature. It's not just the fixed guideway for commuter or light rail or streetcar. It's also looking at water taxi as well. Then when we start looking at the major investments as it relates to 2020 to 2045, and one of the things that I want to make sure that I'm always hitting that little later is about the fact that when we're looking at these dollars, we've got the first 5 years that you've already made the decision on. That's part of your TIP. So when you're seeing the 2026 and further out, it's because we're looking at what will then start entering the TIP in the life of this project. So we're looking at all kinds of opportunities here for major investments for economic growth. Looking at I-75, 4, the Causeway, excuse me, including Fowler, where look to see of making a change from 8 lanes to 6 with multimodal opportunities. So really making that complete street alternative there. Looking at your downtown interchange, as well as county projects, and in particular looking at county projects on county roads that can help reduce congestion, that are going to help ensure that wildlife protected areas are safe, and that there is no adverse effect to disadvantaged populations, to ensure that their mobility actually gets increased as part of these projects. Now again, in those first 5 years that we look at, which we're talking about the adopted TIP and the FDOT work program, looking at a lot of options there too. So we separated those out in the document itself because we wanted to see and show you where the decisions had been made, but it's an important aspect of the LRTP and then where you're going. So the last 2 slides is showing that vision and being able to work with the HART board to see fixed guideway then being implemented in Tampa, as well as then other larger roadways. These then are the roadways that you're looking at, and I always like to say that you're really starting to cut the checks for, that you're starting to see move forward. We wanted to make sure that we group those all together in one impact area as well. So once we looked at this plan, it was what's going to be the impact of it. So we've got the dollars, we've got the budget, we've got the eligibility. Well, what are we looking to achieve? You're looking to achieve all kinds of things, looking at 250 miles of being able to make sure that these high vulnerable roadways, critical roadways are improved, so that way you're not dealing with stormwater and drainage issues. You're also looking at trying to reduce congestion. In fact, looking at intersection improvements along 200 miles of your roadways to make sure that traffic is moving effectively. And then saving lives. Simply vision zero, getting it to the point where you're reducing crashes, where you're reducing the number of pedestrian and bicycle incidences that occur, and then increasing transit ridership. So all of this plan was geared towards having an impact, not just today, but into the future. Now, all that being said, that was kind of a recap of some of the things that we had talked about at our last meeting, but I think it's important for you to know that there have been changes since we met with you back in October. One of the things that the board had directed staff to do in working with them is to make sure to coordinate with FDOT and look to see what projects needed to be in there relative to what was in the TIP, but also in their work program. So we've done that. I-275's been added by adding 2 lanes, as well as SR-60. So those were the 2 big projects that got added that you didn't see in your last draft that was done during the public comment. But then we're also looking at other changes and working with county staff, making sure that there's other projects that are local in nature that are being included. And that's really where we got the idea of separating out those first 5 years so you could see what had already been decided on and moving forward. So all of that brought us to some pretty basic changes to say, okay, now all of these dollars, the $34.6 billion has been fully allocated. You've got some minor shifts that occurred in the eligibility of funding, but all of it was able to balance out, and there were no changes in the funding totals. So we were able to get the Rubik's Cube to work. We were able to satisfy what you were looking for and meet all the requirements as well. Now, after all this is done, even once the plan is adopted, there's obviously some work to be done. HART is going to be looking at where would that fixed route system look like, and how could the MPO be a part of that? And again, helping understand what the impact would be. But then you've also got a lot of money for local roads and local road improvements. Where should they be? Where can the MPO help? Because we've gone through a process to identify where there's heavy congestion. Where can we reduce that congestion? Where are there populations that we want to make sure that they have more mobile opportunities to get to work, to get to school, to get back home? And then the MPO, once it's adopted, will go through that rigorous process of constantly monitoring this plan, making sure that it's having the impact that you've dictated from its adoption, that we're changing that scope of transportation within Hillsborough County. And that leads me to my thank you. It's been a real pleasure to work with all of you. I just have to say it's really been a joy. I've worked in 20 different states on LRTPs doing this, and your staff has been amazing. We've really done this in land speed record, and we're really proud of this document. We were able to keep it nice and short. I think it was roughly about 60 pages, making sure that it was public friendly, and that was really a big part of what you all, the input that you gave to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now moving to the public hearing. First and foremost, staff, sir. Move the timer from behind the computer so that people can see what it is there. Okay. We're moving to the public hearing. Each speaker will have 3 minutes unless someone yields their time to that speaker. And if you're yielding your time, you need to tell us that you are yielding the time. The timer is in front of you. The yellow light means you have 30 seconds, and the red light means your time is up. So if you have any questions, please ask the question when you get forward. First speaker is Nicholas Glover.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Glover. I'm a resident of Tampa Heights. Here today in my capacity as Vice President of Advocacy for the Chamber of Commerce, soon to be the Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here very simply to reiterate the Chamber's support for 2045 long-range transportation plan, and specifically the elements of TB Next that connect our growing region. I don't have to tell anyone up here that we have the 9th fastest growing region in the country, and so it's important that we prepare for that growth. And so the Chamber is here because we understand that we have to grow. There's a necessity for improved infrastructure, as well as the keen understanding that we have to support and protect our neighborhoods while we prepare for the next 100 years. So without objection, I do have a letter of support that I will submit to you all for your consideration momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jim Davison. Is Diane Davison yielding her time to you, sir? You are? And Joseph Catano, you're yielding time to Mr. Davison? Mr. Davison, you have 9 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Chairman, good evening. What you have before you, the handouts I gave you, were done after reviewing and comparing the 2040 Long-Range Transportation Plan, the one that is currently in place, and for the first time, and this is my 6th Long-Range Transportation Plan, for the first time in history is fully funded. In fact, it is overfunded. The 1-cent sales tax was passed last year. Hillsborough County brought in $812 million in the tax policy. So it's the first time in history, and it compares it to the proposed 2045 plan, which is also funded by a 1% sales tax, but also includes a half-cent CIT tax if it's reauthorized in 2026. The assumptions made by the consultant were that the entire amount, short of the 25% given to the school district would be taken and given to transportation. $3.772 billion, all of it, for transportation. I have to ask the dais, who thinks that that is a viable proposal in Hillsborough County? That the entire CIT tax will be given by the City of Tampa, Plant City, Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County to go for transportation? Please raise your hand. Then why would you allow the staff to tell the governor of this state, through this document, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, and multiple members of Congress, that this is a viable proposition? It's not even close. Historically, it's 26% of the total, or about $1.3 billion. The spending in the 2040 plan, total, including SIS, was a little over $22 billion. 5 years later, the total amount of spending in the 2045 plan, including the SIS, is $32 billion. Almost $10 billion increase in 5 years. That is non-sustainable. You can't, every 5 years, if you're going to add $10 billion, we'll have a budget the size of the state of Florida's. Along with this plan, there was some changes in the allocations given between the projects in the 2040 plan and the projects in the 2045 plan. There was decrease in funding from the 2040 plan to the 2045 plan in bridge and transit maintenance, side paths and trails, which was decreased by 50% from 2040. Crash reduction was reduced by $123 million. TD transit was down $30 million. There were increases from the 2040 plan in the 2045 plan. Road maintenance went up 85% in 5 years. And it's hard to get your hands around that, because Hillsborough County in 2040 was said that if you allow $24 million every year for the next 20 years, you will meet all your obligations. This year, they raised it to $35 million. Inflation. Every 17 years, you'll be able to do the roads. But the city of Tampa, in 2040, were required to do $18 million a year. And in the 2045 plan, that was reduced by 25% to $13.5 million. That doesn't make any sense. How could theirs go down and Hillsborough County's go up? Nothing's changed. Plant City, they had theirs reduced by 37%, down from $4 million, which was in 2040, to $2.5 million this year. So if you do $2.5 million every year from 2026 to 2045, you'll meet all your obligations. I think you're currently doing it at $2 million. Temple Terrace was the only one that stayed the same. Minimized congestion increased 100% to $3.43 billion. Vulnerability increased 200% to $3.764 billion. Bus transit went up $700 million. That's because the BRTs, which weren't included in the 2040 plan, are now included in the 2045 plan in that category. MPO planning went up 631%. I mean, it's good, but there's a lot you can do with that. Major investments for economic growth, SIS spending went up $2.8 billion and responsible for about 30% of that $10 billion increase. Fixed guideway rail went up $73 million, all of it financed by sales tax, which it was in 2040. Local and non-SIS road capacity went up 136%. But when you take a closer look, in 2040, it was all financed by the sales tax, that category. This time around, only $814 million of the sales tax were used. $1 billion of the CIT tax was put in there that may or may not be available, and $255 million in mobility fees, which weren't included in that section, are included here, to give you a total of, I think it's $3 billion roughly. The only trouble is 90 to 95% of the roads that are under consideration are the responsibility of Hillsborough County. And in that $817 million, Hillsborough County's share is only $600 million. Not only that, that's in year of expenditure dollars. The road costs that are listed on the public thing are done in present year dollars. You're only going to be able to build about 25% of those roads. Which ones you do, who knows? But which ones did they use in the congestion studies? Which ones did they use to determine that 80% of the future congestion was going to be wiped out? And they changed that from 40% through the study. So, speaking of congestion and the performance, which is what we all want to know, where are we? Basically, there is almost no difference between spending $22 billion from 2020 to 2040 or spending $32 billion from 2026 to 2045. The performance metrics are almost identical. You're going to have a much worse increase in congestion. I think vehicle delay hours increases 300%. Your time reliability goes way up, so your commute from work is going to become much, much worse, and these are your numbers. Not only that, but the greenhouse gases are going to go up by 54 to 74%. The air is going to get dirtier, your trips are going to get longer, and it won't matter whether you spend $22 billion or $32 billion. But you will be ready for a hurricane if it comes. In good conscience, you know, you really have to ask the question, is this what the people really thought they were going to get? The bottom line is, you know, there's a lot of maps that go with this. You have maps showing one, if you did not do anything after 2025, every single road in Hillsborough County would be a failed road. I think you started off one of the plans with that. You have maps for transit, you have maps for roads being considered to be widened. You know what you don't have? You do not have a map showing the people of this county what their road system and transportation system is going to look like after you spend $32 billion. That would be like me telling you to buy a house, paying $1 million, and you never get to see it. Is that fair? Is that the best we can do? I'm hoping that with the $100 million that you get, that the MPO can address some of these issues, and I hope that you get to balance the budget. Mr. Chairman, understand this is your last long-range transportation plan. It may be mine also. Health and happiness to you, sir.
Same to you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Davidson, can you give your name on the record?
Jim Davison from New Tampa.
Ann Klug.
Good evening, and thank you for your time tonight. I'm hoping to keep this relatively short. Lisa mentioned the letter that we sent. I'm Ann Kulig, here on behalf of the West Shore Alliance. I'm here to talk on behalf of our board president, Julie Harris-Herndon, who could not be here, but really to ask you to support the LRTP as it's presented by staff. They did a tremendous job, I think, with outreach throughout this process, probably unprecedented outreach from previous years when you've done the LRTP. And I think it really is a balanced approach, and the plan reflects kind of what people throughout this county said they wanted. You know, we are obviously very pleased with the recent announcement from the governor about funding for the West Shore interchange and getting that moving forward. But really, we're looking forward to implementing many of the other multimodal options that you see in this plan. We in West Shore are woefully underserved by transit and really need to kind of move the needle on that. So we look forward, we're thankful for the priority on transit, but also the priority for bike, ped, safety, et cetera. It's all really important to us. I know about a year ago, we did a presentation about a kind of a micro plan for the West Shore District, our West Shore Transportation Action Plan, and that is a multimodal plan. Some of the elements that were in that plan have been incorporated by the various agencies. So we look forward to continuing to work with you, with HART, with the city, with the county, with FDOT as we continue to move transportation forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Metz.
Good evening. My name is Adam Metz. I live in downtown, and I'd like to ask this board to remove the toll lanes from West Tampa and strike the quick fix, which will be neither quick nor a fix. And the reason that those should be removed is to give all for transportation a chance to work. Ever since 2015, when I got involved in this, the refrain from FDOT was that there was no commitment from local leadership or from local citizens to invest in ourselves. So they said that they had no option but to move forward with TBX. And now we do have options besides TBX. And also you need to give the Department of Transportation a reason to help Hillsborough County acquire the CSX lines, which are the best opportunity we have to connect to Pinellas and Pasco counties. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Holman.
Members of the board, thank you. I wanted to just take a second and acknowledge the huge accomplishment that Ann referred to, which was the $1.4 billion of funding for the West Shore interchange. And important to note that we competed with many other communities across the state to secure this funding. And I think we succeeded with that because we came together as a region. We came together, elected officials, public, private, all speaking with one voice, and Tallahassee listened and Tallahassee responded. And I hope that we can, as a community, repeat that process many times in the future to secure the resources we need for the improvements that we desperately need to make. The partnership, my name is Rick Homans, I'm the CEO of the Tampa Bay Partnership, and we support the multimodal improvements that have been referred to, the CSX line, the Florida-Nebraska bus rapid transit, the streetcar, the regional rapid transit, the pedestrian and the bike improvements, all of the above. And also we support the multimodal improvements that are included in the long-range transportation plan that you have before you this evening. We encourage you simply to support the plan as presented, and thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight.
Thank you. Connor McDonald.
Good evening. I'm Connor McDonald, and I'm also going to read directly off my notes. Thank you. But I'm here to support removing line items S3, S27, S28, and S29 from the 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan. So I'm a second-year graduate student in urban and regional planning, and this is my first public comment, so bear with me, but it certainly won't be my last. In August, I had the great privilege of studying sustainable urban mobility abroad in the Netherlands. It felt like a dream. At one point, I saw 6 different modes of transportation: walking, cyclist, bus, tram, a canal taxi, and a metro stop, all in between 2 buildings. 6 modes, and I didn't even mention the car. The Dutch have something we don't: mobility choices. And out in the Netherlands, there's a ring road around the city that allows for vehicular traffic, but inside the ring, there's little to no access for cars. This means that for some, a car trip is 15 minutes, while biking takes 3 minutes. You see, the Netherlands not only gives people its mobility choices, but mobility choices that favor environmental sustainability, personal, physical, and mental health, increased safety, and social equality. Here, we're debating literally paving a way for more social inequity, social isolation, decreased physical activity, and further into Florida's natural wetlands. Not to mention that Brandon Boulevard is outside the urban service boundary. It's not just culture that accounts for these differences. It's the choices that policymakers take. The Netherlands isn't an alternative universe, although it feels like it. They're just making the right choices, and you have that choice to remove these line items. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ron Weaver.
Ron Weaver, I live in Beach Park. I must compliment this young man. If this is your first, you're going to have many great opportunities to address this community. That was fantastic and well said. I don't agree with all the conclusions, though, and here's why. I think that on the table is a quick fix for $175 million of malfunction junction, that it might function again. There are over 1,000 crashes in that interchange, because when you're going west, deciding whether to intuitively or counterintuitively go north to USF, straight ahead to downtown, or counterintuitively left to go to St. Pete, the confusion creates many of those 1,000 crashes. And in the other directions, there's a similar problem. The magnitude of the 2 or 3 mile backup of that one lane to go south into Malfunction Junction and then to go east to Orlando is almost criminal. To have left that as one lane for the last 30 years after we planned it for 2 lanes for the last 35 years and did not have the courage to fund it. We mustn't let the $175 million quick fix of Malfunction Junction be money that goes to other jurisdictions in Miami or Jacksonville, Orlando, waiting for us again as we postpone that money for 2 years to fix Malfunction Junction and the lanes in and out of Malfunction Junction. We need to fix it in this long-term transportation plan. Please don't take out Malfunction Junction with respect to tonight's plans. Please don't let that money go to other jurisdictions. Please don't let those 1,000 crashes in that one interchange alone persist. Please include the interchange at 14th and 15th and Ybor as a part of that solution. Thank you for only taking 8 properties instead of 100 or 200 or 300 as had been necessary over the next 1, 2, or 3 years ago when you had a much more ambitious plan with respect to the fix, the urgently needed fix here. And then secondly, these are free lanes. They're not toll lanes. And that segues me to your please don't take out the 2 additional toll lanes between Himes and technically in your documentation it says to the river, which really means to Ashley, which means to downtown. If you're going to have toll lanes from St. Pete to downtown and toll lanes from the airport to downtown, and you stop them at Himes and no place to go, with all due respect, we need to take those toll lanes from the airport and St. Pete and Carillon and elsewhere all the way downtown. So please don't take out the 3A or the A3 item that would cause those toll lanes to stop at Himes instead of coming downtown, technically in your paperwork, to the river, which means to Ashley. Please let the toll lanes go all the way to downtown on Ashley, and don't take those out tonight, with all due respect to your Citizens Advisory Committee. But I am pleased to report and conclude with this, that 2 of your members of the Citizens Advisory Committee were among the 9 who voted to leave the Malfunction Junction, the $175 million quick fix in this plan. Your own Citizens Advisory Committee recommended leaving the quick fix in the plan. I think the vote was 9-7, and
Thank
the
you,
best
Mr.
2
Weaver.
speakers were Luke Preda,
Thank
who's
you, Mr.
new.
Weaver.
Yes, sir.
Thank
I'm
you.
done. And David
Yeah,
Bailey,
you're
who
done.
said safe.
Mr. Weaver.
Thank you.
Michelle Cookson.
Hello, Michelle Cookson. We're at a critical juncture and turning point. Now is the moment to turn toward what the community has consistently, relentlessly, and for years requested, that Hillsborough County prioritize transit first and ahead of further interstate expansion and road widening, that we put people first in all we do, planning, design, and implementation of transportation. It must focus on their safety, their health, their well-being, our future. I want the MPO board to listen to the people and the voices of its CAC, dedicated volunteers who have requested that you remove that operational plan from DTI. It's only going to induce more demand and dump high-speed interstate traffic onto our city streets. Remove line items S3, 27, 28, and 29. But beyond that, I'm requesting more of this MPO and acknowledging how broken our process is. I will work hard to change that, but tonight all I have is you all sitting here. I respectfully request that you listen to the people and vote per their wishes. I'm asking you to change some things around about how this board operates. We need citizen members voting on this board. We need to add a critical and meaningful metric category to the LRTP that puts people and their well-being first, an equity, access, and climate resiliency category. Create accountable metrics looking at the reducing carbon footprint, guaranteeing access for all users, and preventing the repetition of civil rights abuses and systemic racism. Most of all, we need to face the bottom line. We cannot pave our way out of, nor prevent congestion if we don't simply just get more cars off the road. What are you doing to reduce trips? Every time FDOT cites projections of expected cars, your first question back should be, what are you doing to reduce those trips? Set metrics and hold them accountable for those numbers. Guided by our new equity, access, and climate resiliency metric, let's set goals that get those cars off the road. So if we expect many hundreds of thousands of new residents by 2045, then set a goal to reduce the car trips and vehicle miles traveled. 50% by 2045, or 8,000 cars a day, something meaningful, some concrete goal. Then take every project and say, does this reduce those trips? Does this reduce cars on the road? If it doesn't, right out of the tip. Measure it, bring accountability to this process, show the people what is getting done. And here's a pro tip. You will hit those metrics faster if you prioritize and build transit. Thank you.
Joshua Frank.
Good evening, Board. Joshua Frank, 2010 East Palm, Ybor City. My wife and I just closed on a house this evening, and so my prepared remarks aren't as fresh in my mind. But we chose to stay in this area in Old Seminole Heights is where we chose to move towards, hopefully, because of the progress that this board has chosen to make in regards to Vision Zero and transportation and reducing trips. And I came to this board about 2 or 3 years ago and challenged you guys and challenged ourselves as a community that we want other cities to start coming to us to learn what to do. And with supporting projects like Boulevard Tampa and with some of the decisions that have been made by the citizens with Offer Transportation, that is happening. I'm going to conferences in Washington, D.C. and in Portland and all these other places, and people are asking me, how are we getting these things done? How is your MPO listening to you? How are your citizens having such a big impact on this process? Because we can't even get our leaders to listen to us. That is a huge shift. We, at this moment, have the chance to lead the nation and to lead the discussion about how we start to change an auto-dependent city to an area that is more mobile, more equitable, and more sustainable. Michelle's absolutely right. We need to start asking every project, not just economic development numbers, but how many numbers of cars is this going to remove today, in 5 years, and in 10 years, and in 50 years? Because if we don't start doing that now, we will never start removing cars from the road. And these projects that I am fully behind the CAC's recommendation to remove these 2 items from the tip. If we don't start acting like that and following through on this and measuring this in a more meaningful way, we will never get there. For example, and I know we're growing as a population. That is not something that is a blanket statement that says these people are only going to drive. We are the 9th fastest region, I think somebody said. Well, the #1 region is Seattle. Seattle is not only growing, but it's growing way faster than anywhere else in this country. They are investing more in transit than they are in expanding and widening roadways. And guess what? They have the lowest amount of car ownership in their city since the early 1980s. Okay? They're not only growing, they're growing and reducing the amount of cars they have. It is possible. It is not some false choice that says, well, people are going to come here, we have to expand the roads. That doesn't work. The only way that you can reduce trips is to invest in transit and stop widening roads, because induced demand is a real thing. So with that, I thank you.
Trinity Miller.
Hello, everybody. My name is Trinity Miller, and I am a resident of Tampa. I'm also the Vice President of the Student Advocates for Progressive Planning at USF, and I'll be graduating with a Master of Urban and Regional Planning degree this semester. I'm here today to ask you to please uphold the recommendations of the Citizens Advisory Committee by removing line items S3, S27, 28, and 29 from the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. These items will create a toll road that will only benefit those who are able to pay for it, and that's not me. These items will also promote sprawl in our county outside of the urban service area. We want to see these resources allocated for projects towards areas in need. I want to see reliable multimodal transportation and infrastructure. I want buses that come so regularly I barely check the schedule. I want to see real bicycle infrastructure. Hillsborough County is a dangerous environment for cyclists and pedestrians. I tried to embrace a multimodal transportation lifestyle and was hit by a car on Fowler Avenue. I want to see us move away from this car-centered culture, and I want to see us use the CSX tracks for residential and pedestrian rail. I just want to use the CSX tracks, y'all. I also want oak trees that provide shade and encourage walkability in our city. So let's take that first step and making our county safer in the long-range transportation plan by please removing line items S3, 27, 28, and 29, just like the Citizens Advisory Committee recommended. Thank you very much.
Linda Redmond.
Good evening, I'm Linda Raymond, President and CEO representing the Tampa Downtown Partnership, our Board of Directors, and 240 member companies. Our organization has been a long and vocal supporter of providing as many multimodal options as possible. We understand that providing a conglomerate of options benefits more people. With a downtown supporting 14,000 residents and nearly 60,000 workers, it is vital that our city continue to invest in transportation, including a current interstate system that works well. Therefore, with that, the partnership supports the Hillsborough County 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan. The recent announcement to invest in West Shore Interchange is vital to our region. It is also imperative that the downtown interchange continue to be included in the overall LRTP. We encourage the board to go a step further and consider all improvements to the interstate from West Shore through downtown to the USF area. We look forward to working with you further, the City of Tampa and FDOT, to put measures in place that function best for our downtown, taking our surrounding neighborhoods into consideration and preserving Ashley Drive as our grand boulevard. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Tyler DeMond.
Hi, y'all. My name is Tyler DeMond. I am a stakeholder living and working in Tampa. I am part of Student Advocates for Progressive Planning. I'm not paid to be here. I'm here to speak for people who can't speak out today. I'm here to ask that you please remove line items S3, S27, S28, and S29 from the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. Instead, the stakeholders living in our city, as you've heard expressed tonight, want to see the inclusion of multimodal transit options. We want separated, protected bicycle infrastructure, please. We want bus rapid transit, please. We want light rail, please. We want commuter trains on CSX, please. We want more ferries between Tampa and other cities, please. We want native oak trees lining the street to provide more shade and cover for pedestrians. The population growth projection in the 2045 long-range growth forecasts clearly show that there is an impending need to make our city more accessible, more walkable, more bikeable, easier to navigate by bus and train. This will reduce congestion by reducing the number of single occupancy vehicles on the road. So again, I ask that you please remove line items S3, S27, S28, and S29 from the LRTP, because these items will create a toll road that will only benefit a small number of stakeholders, the ones with the money, promote urban sprawl, and weaken Tampa's ability to compete with other major cities that focus on multimodal transportation. Thank you for your time.
Chris Villa. David Urena, you're giving Chris his time. Mr. Villa, you have 6 minutes. Mr. Villa, you're looking mighty sharp, man. I haven't seen you like that before.
Trying. Good afternoon, board. My name is Chris Vella, 33605 Historic Ybor City. I wanted to step back a little bit and focus on June 11th. There was a letter from Kathy Castor where she obviously wrote to the chair, but also the MPO board was copied. And it was a report to the U.S. House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee. And this is what she said. I advise the committee that, first and foremost, the Tampa Bay area must expand transit options, and that our community recently voted to move beyond gridlock and invest in transit and other efficient transportation solutions. So she's referencing AFT. AFT came from the folks behind me. They came from citizens. It was a vehicle and a way for you to say that we can fund transit. We can connect people better and safer. We got that money from you. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And then she goes on to saying about Tampa to this subcommittee, my community ranks high in the number of pedestrian and bicycling deaths. And we really haven't seen that change, folks. We're allowing FDOT to do what they want, to expand where they want to do. And unfortunately, we're we're trying to do this bike ped thing, but it isn't working when we're having a lot of cars being dumped onto local roads, and it just gets in the way of transit, it gets in the way of safety. It really hurts the community badly. As Josh mentioned, we were part of a CNU trip, this Congress of New Urbanism, a summit, transportation summit, where a lot of folks were coming to us and saying, wow, how do you do this? How do you get 800 people to show up in the MPO? How do you have these conversations of, transit and rail in Republican Florida, right? And we just say you have to be persistent. You have to get involved. And I am very proud of my organization. I'm really proud of my community for having people in our group taking on leadership roles, having people in our group volunteering for city and county. I think it's marvelous. And then it's inspiring to see younger people becoming planners and transportation planners, like urban planners and transportation planners, because they want to help their city. We are doing a really good mission here. We are not trying to undermine cars. What we're trying to say is that what we're doing and what we have been doing is the wrong direction and has been for the longest time. Now, I'm going to go into the mayor's plan. I did a word search. Transit is mentioned in her report 30 times. There is no highway widening or interstate mentioned at all in this report. CSX is a massive priority. A parking maximum will be SALT, so why are we doing more cars if downtown's looking to get rid of them? Vision Zero is mentioned 19 times, and surface BRT is mentioned several times. So surface BRT means that we don't want a bus on a highway with parking garages, so I want to be clear with that. Now, I was really upset, I guess, with what happened on October 1st. I did not see that preferred alternative plan. My neighborhood didn't see that preferred alternative plan. I think it was a step in the wrong direction for this board to approve it. I think that you guys need to relook at that decision and rescind it. In the case where I live, I'm going to see 30,000 cars coming off of the 14th and 15th Street exit, pouring onto Nucio Parkway. That's going to be very dangerous for the students of Hillsborough County Community College. That's going to be dangerous for people like me. That's going to hurt my community. That's going to hurt my air quality. It's going to destroy my life. Please do not support this plan, this quick fix or whatever, because it is literally sending our community into a realm of high cancer risk and also avoiding cars at high speed. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the LRTP. I think to sum it up, we just can't do any interstate widening east of Lois Avenue. Yes, the West Shore folks got what they wanted, but now you can see they want to take more. And I think at this point, what we need to do, and it was a really good point made, we got to let the transportation surtax mature a little bit. We got to let it season a little bit for the people, right? We can't thrust highways and cars in front of these pedestrian plans that we got in our long-range transportation plan. We also need to focus on CSX. If you look at the report, it's only talking about these railway crossings. It's not actually talking about a plan to taking a transportation plan and making an action point. We need to jump on that yesterday. So there was a mentioning about having an additional category. I don't know if it's going to be category 3 or 4 to LRTP, but I'd like to see a motion from this board to adopt new metrics regarding equity, which should be access and fairness. And also looking at carbon footprints to check and balance all these projects from here on out. We do not know the true benefits that we're going to get from these projects. And we know that since the 1970s, we have all these engineers crunching numbers. We're still at the same problem, always throwing more cars at the situation, increasing the interstate, throwing more cars here and there. We know it doesn't work. At some point, and there's been about 3 or 4 major updates on the downtown interchange, I-275. It just doesn't work. We all need some time here, folks. We don't need to rush into this decision. We need to have a conversation with the citizens. We have to let this AFT money go through. And DC is watching. They're watching these meetings, and believe me, they're just flustered as to why we're approving such projects like this. So let's put everything on pause and do something for the people. Thank you.
Laura Urino.
Good evening. My name's Laura Urania. I live in North Ybor neighborhood, zip code 33605. and I had to tell Chris I regretted coming after him because he's a hard act to follow. But that being said, I'm just here to reiterate what many of the other citizens have said previously, that as citizen stakeholders that live in this community, that use these roads, that walk our dogs on these roads, that have kids that go to school, and that are stakeholders of this community, we strongly oppose any kind of interstate expansion or highway widening or any projects that basically cause the induced demands and bring more cars on the road. Why is that? The reason being is safety issues that have been cited. Another reason is environmental considerations. My background is in environmental engineering, and I can tell you without a doubt that cars are a major contributor not only to public health issues, but also something called global warming, climate change, that now both sides of the aisle are starting to acknowledge. So when we propose projects that basically induce more car demand, it goes and I guess against the science and where we should be heading in terms of public health, public safety, and moving into a future that's more equitable for other humans. So I just urge the committee to go forward with what the recommendation of the Citizen Advisory Committee was, and to remove line item S3, 27, 28, and 29 from the LRTP. And to explore other options that are better for moving our area into a brighter future, and in a area that attracts new economic growth and new businesses, specifically looking into things like use of the CSX rails and alternate modes of transportation, and halting all highway expansions. So thank you for your time.
Our last speaker is Kelly Grimsdale.
Hello, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but anyway, I'm Kelly Grimsdale. I'm the president of the VM Ybor Neighborhood Association, but I am here to speak on my own behalf. As a resident whose neighborhood will be further greatly affected by any expansion of I-4 and 275, I ask that you keep in mind the rich historic fabric in the Ybor area and produce alternative multimodal plans, and certainly not toll lanes, that would help to preserve this fabric. The plan to redirect all of the traffic coming to and from Ybor from 21st and 22nd Streets to Republica de Cuba and 15th Street with an estimated 30,000 cars a day doesn't sound like a positive impact on VM Ybor. Further, with all of the plans proposed to date, our residents will lose easy on and off routes onto the highway because all of the flyover lanes that are proposed pass over our neighborhood. Pass over VM Ybor. Again, please engage with the community more and design alternative plans that will work better for the residents that actually live in these neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. This closes the public hearing. We're now moving to board discussion. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Good evening. We heard a lot today, especially about 27, 28, and 29. And I took a look at the projects in multiple ways to try and discern why they were on the list. And I got some conflicts there. One, there was comment made earlier about it actually possibly widening an area that would actually create sprawl. And obviously development does do that to some extent. But I also couldn't understand when the actual report suggested that congestion forecasts didn't justify making that expansion happen. The other issue associated with that is if for some reason the reason we needed an extra lane was to address potential freight from the freight logistics areas that are to our east, then maybe we really do need to address the what, how, and why we're using the CSX lines. Right now, widening 60 isn't necessary and it isn't justified given the population growth nor the congestion estimates, not only in the FDOT's analysis, but in the MPO, as well as within our comprehensive plan. So I am going to make a motion that we remove 27, 28, and 29 from the LRTP.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Commissioner Smith. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Yes, I would just like to say I totally agree with that. I know this was a recommendation by the CAC, and I thank the CAC for presenting this to us. This is State Road 60 from Dover Road to Polk County. It's well outside the urban service area and not an area where we want to invest for a widening, and it's widening from 4 to 6 lanes. I do agree it is potential to create sprawl. Also, traffic congestion forecasts show that if we do nothing on State Road 60 at this area through 2045, the 4 lanes that exist will satisfy traffic demands through 2045. Also, there is the issue of the road running to Brandon, and we really don't want to put or encourage any more use of the road as it enters Brandon. The corridor, State Road 60 through Brandon, is a severe crash corridor. And so this has not only not a potential benefit, but a harmful it can greater harm and greater exacerbate the issue that we're having on State Road 60 in Brandon. And as I understand, I'd like to ask Ms. Alden, I understand that this was supposed to be to accommodate freight, but that you did a stakeholders, some kind of stakeholders group with freight operators, that really this is not really what they desired either.
Thank you. This board led the creation of a freight logistics zone, which looks at the connections between Polk and Hillsborough, the Winter Haven Intermodal Logistics Center, over to Port Tampa Bay, and continuing on to Tampa International Airport. As part of that, we did talk to a lot of freight stakeholders, and the truckers that we spoke to were preferring to take the Polk Parkway to I-4 with their transportation connection. Traveling on State Route 60 does put them into the center of Brandon, which is very congested and was not their preferred route. And so the recommendation out of that Freight Logistics Zone strategic plan was to focus on improvements on the I-4 corridor and along US 92, paralleling I-4 just to the south, looking also at interchange improvements along that corridor. So definitely a number of improvements needed. But State Route 60 was not one of the areas that was flagged.
As well as a new Amazon fulfillment center is right up there by 92, correct?
Near 92 and I-4.
And so this would also not serve that. So I think this would not be a good investment for us to be making. I know that we have many, many other places that are in dire need, whether that be Vision Zero corridors with severe crashes like State Road 60 through Brandon, or whether it be resiliency issues, as in some of the things that have been pointed out, like using or raising the low-lying portion of Gandy Boulevard between West Shore and the Gandy Bridge to accommodate sea level rise. So I think there's many other uses for this, and I appreciate the motion being made and support it.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
As soon as okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks to all the citizens for coming out tonight, and all the groups who spoke tonight. There was the student advocates for progressive planning at USF made an especially compelling case for removing these 3 segments of widening State Road 60. The CAC also was opposed. As was mentioned, the Planning Commission was opposed, and this body, the MPO, sent a letter in December expressing concerns about widening this stretch of road. It is completely rural land, functioning farmland. There's no point in widening this road through that area. So I'm very, very much in support.
Mayor Lott, you recognize.
Okay, I'll be opposing this motion, and simply because State Road 60 all should have been widened years ago. Okay, the amount of traffic that's on 60, the reason why it's unsafe is because it's people trying to fly to get to where they are. They expanded lanes. It's backed up from 39, which is just south of Plant City, all the way into Brandon. This is a corridor where the people coming from Polk County are driving to the jobs that are in Brandon, from Plant City into Brandon, okay? And it's the main corridor going into Plant City. It's also a main corridor for people that work in Fishhawk and so forth that's traveling either to Plant City for jobs or into Polk County for jobs. You know, I think that when we look at plans and so forth, we sit here as a body and we say, we need to support all programs. You know, I support multimodal, I support train, I support transportation, support all that, you know, but it's hard to say that you're going to support one and then take away from another. In East Hillsborough County, we have 3 roads that need to be widened. We have 92, 574, and we have 60, you know. This 60 is really, really important to the citizens of East Hillsborough County. Segments of 574 is being widened in this plan from Seffner all the way out to McIntosh Road. But if you look at 92 and 60, there is no widening plans in place unless if we don't approve this. We have a major issue on 92 as well I spoke to last time that this doesn't address, but hopefully we can address it in the future. And I think the school board members would attest to that too, where we have 3 schools at. So I support the entire plan, but 60 is so important. I won't be voting for this because I think it's I think it's a vital segment. And when we talk about the trucking, the logistic community and so forth, the logistics on County Line Road, not everything's coming from the Polk Parkway. Okay, Polk Parkway is east of County Line Road. So your options on County Line Road, where you have about 14,000 jobs right now from logistics centers, such as Amazon and many, many others. Home Depot is being built right now. You either go north and south on County Line Road. If you go south, you hit 60. Okay, if you go north, you hit I-4. You don't go north of I-4 to go to Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota. You go south on 60. I mean, on County Line Road, you hit 60, and then you turn west and go through Brandon. That's the natural route. You're not going to go up and all the way around. Some people may, but most of them don't. And County Line Road the expansion on that is heading south. Okay, you're only about a mile and a half from 60 as it is right now with the latest projects that's been approved on County Line Road. So I think it's very, very vital to our community and to East Hillsborough County. And that's all my comments, sir.
Okay. I see no further discussion. We have a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor of the motion, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers likewise?
Nay.
Motion is adopted.
Right on.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
One of the things that I noticed in this long-range plan is historical information about what we were doing with CSX and what we've heard from not only the citizens, but also lots of discussions in this particular forum is how critically important it is for us to actually look at how CSX can actually serve our citizens. It obviously serves currently right now our freight, and that's an important part of our major transportation priority. But in order for us to really start doing something instead of just talking about something, I think it's critically important that we formally request action as it pertains to our CSX lines. Now, our HART board has shared with the MPO board, and we've had a recent workshop that is discussing how the role works and how the planning works for evaluating how CSX can actually address our transportation needs and what that timeline looks like. So I may need to make this as a new business item, but I'd like to at least have the discussion before we accept the entire LRTP that that we formally request state and federal support for HART's plan negotiation with CSX to begin the competitive process for the New Starts Transit program, and add that to this local MPO's recommendation as a top priority for the Tampa Bay region. This Friday is a TMA meeting and a leadership group. We've been able to accomplish the West Shore interchange as a consequence of it being a top priority. And I think it's critical that we add that a New Starts project in the Hillsborough lead the way towards a regional transit system that includes discussions with either CSX in terms of its right-of-way or its rail or usage. And we won't know that if we don't get it on the list. So if I need to bring that up in new business, I'm asking, or whether or not we can discuss it here and then add it to new business, or if it's a way of adding it to our LRTP. I'm looking for
That's the
guidance
ultimate
there.
question. Are you asking it to be added to the LRTP?
I would love for it to be added to the LRTP.
Asking it to be added to it, we can't discuss it in new business because we'll have adopted the LRTP already.
All right, well then let's add it to the LRTP.
Is that a motion?
Second. Yes.
There's a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Councilman Vieira. Is there any discussion?
If I may.
Yes, sir.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Overman, I thank you, as I've told you before in personal conversations, thank you for your leadership on this issue. I appreciate it 110%. You know, that kind of caught my attention when on our meeting in June, David Gwynn indicated this, which is on our priority list, there's no transit. You know, so let's give them something to work with. I think this is, it's common sense. It's surprising that it hasn't been done before. I'll just be honest. I mean, I think that the vast majority of us here on this board support some robust system of mass transit that is well-funded using CSX tracks, et cetera. And I think this is certainly something that can prioritize that, and it'll, you know, give us something to vote for. You know, there's a lot of dissension on a lot of different issues, but I think on this issue we can be brought together and we can prioritize it and give it some robust formal support, and then we'll do that on Friday too. So I support it.
Commissioner Kipp, you recognized.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank everyone who came and spoke. I'm really proud of the fact that we have such people with such vision and willing to stand up and share those, and I think it's really remarkable, and I'm very proud of that. I as many of you know, have been talking about the CSX tracks now for about 4 or 5 years. I think it was back in March that the HART board at that time unanimously adopted pursuing, looking at the CSX tracks to start negotiations to start to begin to work on acquisition of the CSX tracks. Of course, we have had our issues with the delay on the sales tax at this time, but it is I think it's well over time for us to move in the direction that Orlando already did with Sunrail, that Tri-Rail that they've done in Miami, and it is a extraordinarily cost-effective option that goes through our most transit-dense region from USF, serving directly the USF campus down to Ybor and downtown. So I think it would be a wonderful thing for us to start to work on. They did the Sunrail conversion from freight to commuter rail for only $20 million a mile, which is, relatively speaking, a low-cost option for us to pursue. The tracks exist, the right-of-way exists. We could do this. They did it in Orlando in 8 years, but 3 of those years were spent writing up a contract that we can now use as a model. So I appreciate it being brought up, and I'd like to see if we can get this MPO on board to move forward the CSX as an MPO.
Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Councilman Vieira. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
May I make a motion to...
Turn your microphone on, sir.
There we go. I'd like to make a motion to approve the LRTP as recommended with the 2 amendments that were just previously approved by the MPO board.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McKinney, second by Mr. Kona. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
So there was a lot of talk tonight about the toll lanes, and I'm not going to, I'm going to suggest an amendment, but it won't be at this point, to remove a toll lane. I will, consider anybody else's motion to do that. My motion at this time is just about the tolling. There are several new lanes, let's see, 8 new lanes, or 8 items that have new lanes described as toll express lanes, which have previously been described only as express lanes. This is the first time we're seeing them written down as toll lanes. They were not expressly called toll lanes in the tip. This is the first time. So I would like my amendment, just hoping to pass this step, is to have them described in the long-range transportation plan only as express lanes. So there's 8 of these where they're called express or toll express lanes. It's S1, S2, S3. I think some of the commenters mentioned one of those, and then also S12, S13, S17, S18, and S19. Otherwise, we'd be approving tolling basically all the interstates in this county with this LRTP tonight. We might do that at some other time, but my amendment is hoping that we would approve the LRTP tonight without that. I'm opposed to new lanes being luxury lanes. I'm not calling them Lexus lanes. I'm calling them luxury lanes because even though I use them, I'm somebody who would use them. I represent many, many people who cannot afford to use them. There is a basic inequity in these luxury lanes. They don't pay for themselves. Contrary to popular belief, they do not pay for themselves. In many cases, they cause extra bottlenecks, and they actually limit capacity. That's the whole point. They limit capacity. So my amendment, my motion is to amend the adoption of the LRTP by making all 8 of those items refer only to express lanes. They could be HUV lanes, they could be express lanes.
Talk yourself about a positive vote.
Uh-huh.
Don't talk yourself about a positive vote.
They could be anything, but not toll lanes.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Kemp and Commissioner Citro. Is there any further discussion? Councilman Vieira, you recognize.
Yeah, no, I have a question.
Turn your mic on, sir. Turn your mic on.
I'm sorry. So, thank you. So would this motion, my big challenge with this is I want to know these so-called tolls, how much are they going to be funding of this project that we're looking at on West Shore, for example? I don't know that. Do we know that number, Mr. Gwynn? Do we know that?
Is that something you can answer, sir?
Hi, David Gwynn, Florida DOT. My big concern, and I'm not sure I completely understood the amendment, but we have a lot of money for West Shore interchange. You may be jeopardizing that by saying that those cannot be toll lanes, because that's what we got approved by to get the CIS money. I don't want to hopefully go back after building consensus from around the region and ask them to change it to non-toll.
Wait a minute, wait. Did you say you went and got the money for the West Shore Exchange and you included in that the language of it being toll lanes?
That's always been the toll lanes through the SEIS for the West Shore interchange. Okay. Same as for Howard Franklin Bridge. The point is that was what we went as a region forward. That's what this board unanimously approved in giving us a letter of recommendation. Right. To go back now with the change would be a difficult thing to sell. One thing I'd like to tell you, though, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a state policy that said any new lane on the interstate would be a tolled express lane. We've backed off of that policy now. So not every lane necessarily has to be a tolled express lane. And a lane that may start as a tolled express lane may not always be a tolled express lane. The purpose of the toll is not to generate revenue. The revenue is incidental. The purpose of the toll is to regulate flow within those lanes so that you can create a corridor within a congested corridor, because we know we're not going to build out of congestion, to build a reliable travel time corridor for transit and vehicles that can get around during congested times. Actually, some people who talk about induced demand would say that making all the lanes free would actually induce more demand, because the express lanes actually regulate some of that flow, and it does decrease some of the capacity. We can also make it so that high occupancy vehicles that are registered can use those lanes without paying a toll. We have lots of options. It could be that we only put tolls on it during certain times of the day, and the rest of the day it's free. So just to say that it has to be a tolled, dynamically tolled lane forever is not entirely true. You just flip a switch if that's what you decide to do at some point. But I'd hate at this point to try to go back into the documents that we've already got up to Federal Highway Administration and that we've already got funding for a project and say that we're now reversing course through one of the folks that unanimously accepted this proposal less than 6 months ago.
You already approved this. We approved this in the letter we sent to them already.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on. Thank you. Hold on. Mr. Wagner, recognized.
Secretary Gwynn accurately stated my questions with answers. Thank you, sir.
Mr. McKenna, recognized.
Just to get a clarification on the amendment, did the amendment preclude toll lanes, or, I mean, if it still allows for toll lanes to be determined in the future, does that, Mr. Gwynn, still give you the same concern you just expressed?
I'm not sure that I understand exactly what the amendment is saying in regards to the West Shore interchange.
Hold on.
Saying,
Commissioner Smith, repeat your amendment.
Okay. The motion to amend is just to change the wording on those 8 instances, none of which is the West Shore interchange.
Okay.
None of them is the West Shore interchange. And the language would just change from toll express lanes to express lanes, which could be tolled, could be many other things, just like I was told in earlier discussions when the West Shore thing came up. It was express lanes. I said, is that got to be tolled? And I think it was West Shore was some section, and you said no. It may or may not be. But anyway, none of these are West Shore. And no, it doesn't preclude some future board or decision maker from tolling it. It just means that tonight we don't commit to tolls on all our interstates and all these 8 projects in the county at this point.
Shamberg, recognized.
I just want to ask. Thank you. Is that correct that they're not West Shore? Because if I'm looking at this, if you're talking about S1 and S2, that is the West Shore interchange.
S1 and West 2.
Yes, so are we talking about removing that? I just want to, Commissioner Smith, clarify that I think it is West Shore.
This comes off of, yeah, they come off of that, that's true. But when we initially discussed this, it did not have toll lanes on, and I said I would be opposing it if it were adamantly, or
I think he must have
tolls.
misunderstood me, or I must not have said it correctly, because these have been shown as dynamically tolled lanes, and it's been presented to this board numerous times. I'm not sure where I messed up on that.
Mr. Wagner, recognized.
Again, the Secretary has provided the clarification. Thank you, sir.
As far as the wording, whether you say toll, I'm going to look to my staff, but, I mean, it's always been tolled, but as far as if it doesn't say tolled explicitly, does that hurt the planning studies that we already have? I'm going to ask Ed, because he's more in the weeds on this than I am.
Ed McKinney, DOT. It could. I mean, right now, to date, all the conversations we've had with Federal Highway, we've had with the citizens, we've had publicly, we've had with this board, have explicitly said that these would be dynamically tolled lanes. Now, going back and making those changes to express lanes, what does that mean? What does that mean for traffic? What does that mean for access that we've built into the system? It could have a dramatic effect. I mean, it's to say yes or no here would be difficult to say, but I'm just in my mind playing this out, and yeah, there's some concerns with that.
Let me
I would
address.
say that we don't, again, we can change how we address these lanes in the future should we find that a different strategy works. But I will also tell you, though, as we've gone forward, one of the things that we accomplished in the last year in talking to the folks in Tallahassee is that we're being consistent and we're coming to them with things that they can live. What they don't like is when we change our minds all of a sudden and all the money they've given us goes in their, and they're like, we don't know if these folks are going to maintain their, and I'll tell you what, when you start looking at FTA, they want to make sure you're not going to be flip-flopping decisions all the time. That's what happened in Orlando before Sunrail. But when they lost $700 or $800 million for light rail because their boards flip-flop back and forth, they look for consistency. Are you going to give us a decision today that's going to be the same decision, in a couple years, or are you going to have 6 months later change your mind on something that you've already voted unanimously on to support? So I'm just a little nervous in the signal we're going to send as we look for these projects.
Mr. Secretary, my understanding from staff is that when we sent the letter of support, we didn't address anything as toll lanes in our letter.
But that was everything that was presented ever to this board showed dynamically tolled lanes. If you want to withdraw your support for dynamically tolled lanes, that's a big deal, and I'd have to take that back because it's not what we asked for the money for.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I make it?
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Okay, so to address your motion, S1 and S2, as it stands now, that we have previously sent a letter of support and we have the funding, has specifically in what you understand and what has been presented to Tallahassee has been the toll lanes for 275 from the Howard Franklin Bridge to Himes, or is it State Road 60 from Cypress to Memorial, which is S1 and S2? And then to follow up, is S3, have we promised Tallahassee that we were going to use toll lanes on 275 from east of Himes to east of Hillsborough that we have not yet approved?
No, the proposal was to show that we would take the express lanes down to Ashley. And the reason they have to go to Ashley is because we have to show that we are not going to back those express lanes back up into the West Shore interchange. If you drop everybody off at Himes, you're going to diminish the capability of those express lanes to operate effectively. And so we had to show, and we have to show Federal Highway Administration that these lanes will actually work, that you're not going to just cut them off at some point and then that's going to be where everybody has to get off. This bleeds the traffic off over the time that you go from the West Shore interchange to Ashley.
Agreed. My point is there's a difference between an express lane and a toll lane. And so if we're talking about an express lane that needs to go to Himes, that can be used in a variety of different ways, that's one thing. And I think that's your point, is we're not suggesting that we don't do express lanes for S3. We are suggesting that if we're going to approve to avoid what we may have misunderstood when we sent the letter of support for the West Shore exchange, that it was going to be a toll road versus an express lane, we need to make sure we're clear when we approve this plan. It is the conversation that I think we're having is expressing that we're not so opposed to express lanes and good transportation design to address what needs to happen for the flow coming off the Howard Franklin. What's critically important is recognizing the equity in communities that toll lanes don't show in our overall plan. And so if we don't have to have the tolls, fine. But I don't want to approve a project that says tolls and then be held accountable because we said it said tolls. But
Ms. Alden, you recognize.
In the last long-range transportation plan, these lanes were identified as special use lanes. Would that be satisfactory, and that would give us then an opportunity to continue to work with you over, the next months during the design phase, for example, of these projects, to look at what the toll policies or pricing or what the uses would be? You've mentioned some things that are being done in other cities, like providing options for carpools to use the lanes. I think there are a number of strategies that we could be talking about, and it probably warrant kind of a deeper dive conversation than we could get into tonight.
The draft document that's into FHWA, and we've received all their comments, we're responding to them now, is the document that we're going to use to get a record of decision that we're going to public hearing for in February, that we need to get the public hearing in February in order to have the record of decision in time to buy the right-of-way, to get the money that the governor gave us, spend it on the time that they've given us to do it. My concern is if we go in now with something different than we've had all along, it introduces risk to us. I don't know what level of risk, but I can tell you that to change it at this point, I don't know what would happen. I would feel much more comfortable knowing that you've already got this $1.4 billion for this project in our hand. And why we want to screw around with it? Why do we want to say to move this? We can play around with the tolling strategies as we implement it, but I don't know changing the MPO's direction. If you do, we'll try to do something with it, but I'm telling you, at this point in time is really not the right time to do it.
Mr. Cody, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to be very careful that we don't confuse the people who are giving us the money. It's hugely important that we get this accomplished. I'm not going to support the motion to change. I mean, we've already heard from them that whether we call it a toll, express lane, whatever, we still have the right to figure out how that's going to work. And so I'm not going to approve the motion that's on the floor now.
We have an amendment to the motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner.
Chair, if I may.
You recognize.
Thank you.
Chair, appreciate it. Just
push your mic. There you go.
Dang it, I'm sorry. I'm worried about, I am not a fan of toll roads. I never have been, never will be. But I'm worried about the unintended consequences of this. That's my big challenge, is unintended consequences. I'm not a fan of toll roads at all. I work to oppose them, but I'm worried that we'll, by inserting this language, have unintended consequences that I don't think anybody here intends to have. And I'd like to have more information. I wish this could come back to us in a month or two, for example. We can make more of an informed decision. That's my concern.
Okay. The horse is dead, y'all. Come on. I mean, you know how you're going to vote. Yeah, you know how you're going to vote. Commissioner Kemp, you recognize, but you know how you're going to vote.
Thank you. I just wanted a point of clarification because I didn't understand. How many of these segments that you mentioned are part of the West Shore project, and how many are not?
I don't remember the segments, to be honest with you. The numbers.
So as I look at the draft plan, S1, I'm sorry, as I look at the draft plan, S1, S2, and S3 are part of the West Shore plan.
And what were the other segments that you mentioned?
So S12 and S13 are I-4, most of I-4 and all of I-4 in the county. And S17, S17, 18, and S19 are basically all of I-75 in the county. So all our interstates.
So may I just ask, so are those, in what you're saying, in terms of holding this up in West Shore, if those S1, S2, and S3 that you're saying concern West Shore were left as they are, but S12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 19 were changed to instead just be express lanes, that doesn't affect any...
let me walk through those. So because some of these, so S12, S13 have been approved as, the PD&E document has been approved as tolled. But as the Secretary pointed out, it's still in development phase. We could still, have those discussions. S17, 18, and 19 are still going through the PD&E environmental analysis. Again, these are conversations that still could be had, and we still continue those discussions. I think our comments are primarily focused on the $1.4 billion, which is S1 through S3.
S1, please say that again.
S1, which is I-275 from Howard Franklin to Himes. S2, which is State Road 60 coming down Cypress to Memorial. S3, I-275 east of Himes to Hillsborough River.
Okay.
That's the $1.4 billion.
We have an amendment to the motion. We have an amendment by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Kemp and Councilman Citro. All those in favor of the amendment, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers? Aye. Motion fails. We're now back on the amendment. The main motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Ms. Conan. Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. I would like to suggest an amendment that simply describes the segments that we just spoke about that won't affect any future funding now, as would special use lanes be appropriate, or simply express lanes for those lanes for this time.
Commissioner, I think the use of the term express lanes would be acceptable. We can work with it.
And I'll tell you, just to be clear too, and I'm not sure if I should formulate this differently, but one of my concerns about this, outside of the tolling, is the fact that any of these lanes that I've read about anywhere in the country, and I'd asked about this before, were specifically every single one a hot lane, rather, which would mean for everyone, so that you understand, is not only the tolling, but it would allow for exemptions for multiple occupancy vehicles. And as far as I understand, they have that.
We do allow registered carpools to operate for free within the express lanes.
Okay, so that will, within the express, so in the toll lanes, that will be part of it? Because I'd asked about that in prior years.
Yes, there's no technology really available now to tell how many people are in the car, but if you're a registered carpool, then you can get, you can use it for free.
Okay. I'll suggest this amendment on the ones to change to express lanes within our description. Can you just repeat what segments so I'll be clear, the ones that won't?
Sure, so that was S12, S13, S17, 18, and 19, and those are on I-4 and I-75.
And I appreciate that clarification on the hot lanes, because I wasn't sure if that was being done here. But I'd like to make that amendment to characterize, look at those as express lanes right now.
There's an amendment by Commissioner Kemp. Is there a second? Who's second? I'm hearing seconds, but I don't.
Mr. Wagner.
Mr. Wagner seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Now back on the main motion to adopt the long-range transportation plan by Mr. Mechanic, second by Mr. Kona. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Klug? Yes. Kemp?
Yes.
Mechanic?
Yes.
Gerardo? Citro?
Aye.
Green?
Yes.
Hagan? Scherberger?
Yes.
Lott?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Vieira?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Wagner? Smith?
No.
Kona?
Yes.
Alden?
She doesn't vote.
Oh, okay.
Look, man, you're trying to get on. Motion is adopted. Executive Director's report.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, board members, and thank you, members of the audience, for being part of this. We have just a couple of items of business. I wanted to make sure that it was on your radar screen that our second Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit is happening next week. That is going to be on Thursday from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we're very honored to have several board members who have already registered for that. Thank you so much. And we'll also be joined by Mayor Castor at the awards program that evening. So please come out to that. Jeff Speck will be one of our speakers. Our staff will be temporarily in a different building. So if you're looking for us on the 18th floor of this building for a couple of months, you won't find us there. Because of air conditioning renovations. So we are going to be over at 700 East Twig Street, but our phone numbers will not change. Our next meeting will be on December the 3rd at 9 a.m. We do have our annual election of board officers at that meeting and appointment of representatives to groups like the TMA Leadership Group, which is meeting this coming Friday, as was mentioned by Commissioner Overman and others. So that will be at 9:30 a.m. this coming Friday, and we'll be meeting at the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thanks. This is under new business. I'm sorry
We
that.
haven't got no business yet.
Oh, okay, then I'll wait.
Is there
That's
no
what I
business?
wanted to be.
Now we're in the new business. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry that the audience left because they made many good suggestions, I think, for us to follow up on. It wasn't under the LRTP necessarily, but in terms of categories that we could look at and start to look at the metrics of and start to include in how we move forward. So I'd like to ask that we start to generate and look at how we can generate categories of measurement that include equity as we move forward, that include reducing single occupancy vehicle use, and a climate resiliency mechanism measurement as well, and perhaps an environmental air quality also as well. Greenhouse gas reduction, thank you. So I'd like to be looking at all of those 4 categories, and maybe in the future we can go through and look at how we can start to include those in the metrics of how we move forward.
Any other? Mr. Commissioner, when you recognize.
Because I'm still trying to learn the process. Hillsborough County is in the process of looking at its land use, mobility options, lots of things, comprehensive plan. And one of the things that I know would be very helpful in that planning process is to have a Vision Zero plan. One that actually identifies major corridors and its different types of uses. And that would need to be obviously in a much more short term than a long term, LRTP. But I think it would be very valuable if we actually work together across all of our boards to understand what roads are used for what purposes, where there's an opportunity. Because then it can help us in corridor preservation, in better use of complete street options, and assist in working not only with our economy as it grows for freight or traffic, but more importantly, those options for trails and complete streets would not end up in conflict with each other if we had a better plan in how we grow. So I'd like to investigate what's an option to consider putting together a Vision Zero plan. We talk a lot about Vision Zero, but developing specific specs for Hillsborough County as it relates to Vision Zero in our policies. And that bleeds over into the school board, it bleeds over into our land use. And I think if we actually did that, it would make it much easier for us to have a lot less conflict in how we grow going forward.
I'll come back with some options.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other new business? Any monkey business? We're adjourned.